start today, I'd like to take a few weeks to look at the book of Ruth. Just a little short story. It's a beautiful story. The word God is not mentioned in any of it. So you might even wonder why it's in Scripture. But I think you'll see as we go through how it fits in, why it is included. You need to remember that our Old Testament originally was written to the church in the wilderness, as Stephen said in Acts chapter 7, verse 37-38. In the Old King James, at least, he calls it the church of the wilderness. It's called the congregation or the assembly in most of the modern translations, which is still the church. The Old Testament is not primarily a history of Israel. It is a revelation of God. It shows us that through the nation of Israel, but it's really a revelation of who God is. And their question when they were reading the Old Testament scriptures would have been, what is God like? And they start reading the scriptures, and they would look for clues. In fact, we recognize the same with the New Testament, and our question is, what is Jesus like? Which is really the same question. Which is God, or what is God like, or what is Jesus like? Jesus' words are recorded in John chapter 5, verse 39. He had the Israelites of his day properly searched the old scriptures, they would have recognized him. He says, for they testify of me. That testifying, or that evidence, comes not with just New Testament hindsight. In other words, us looking backwards. But they were able to see that with the Old Testament foresight, looking ahead. They knew from their scriptures that they were familiar with that God was working and had a plan. The Old Testament was based on God's promise. And it was recorded, it was made before this, but it was recorded in Genesis 3, verse 15. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Those words spoken to Satan as God was finishing his curse. That promise was expanded and clarified with each chapter as it followed, and each book that followed in the Old Scripture. It gradually grew to what we have and we call the Old Testament, but it began immediately to clarify and expand on it. It was a promise that generated hope, expectation, and longing for the coming Messiah. He was. They knew there was a coming one, and they were watching for him. Jesus himself said to his disciples, many prophets and righteous men have desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. It's in Matthew 13, verse 17. The people knew there was one coming. They were watching and hoping to be present when that happened. Peter in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 10 and 11 would say later of this concerning this salvation, the prophets have inquired and searched diligently, who prophesied of the grace that would come to you, searching to whom or when the Spirit of Christ who was in them was indicating when he testified beforehand the sufferings of Christ and the glories that would follow. So the prophets of old knew the the things that they were saying, being told to communicate, indicated that there was a coming one. And they were all about trying to understand and look for it. Okay, I've said all of this and read all these scriptures to you to make the case that we can see Jesus in the old scriptures. Jesus said that the people of his day shouldn't have missed it. And we have even more scriptures than what they have, like 27 books more. So as we read this little book of Ruth, I want you to pray for eyes to see and ears that can hear. I want you to look for God to appear in the story. Like I said, he's not there by his title, which is God. He doesn't come that way. What we call Jesus, he's in the shadows, or he is shadowed, you could say. The ancient Israelites, those first believers in God's promise to come for us and to redeem us, would have read this story with the question in mind: what is God like? Or what is he doing? We see the answer acted out in this rich story that reminds us of people that we know, and that gives us a peek behind the curtain that separates us from the one who tenderly loves us. So let's begin. We're going to read, I'm going to work through chapter 1 this morning. Read with me verses 1 through 5. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. The name of his wife was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. We talked about that some this morning. And they went to the country of Moab and remained there. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and so the woman survived her 2 sons and her husband. So you got Naomi's there, somewhat alone, although she's got 2 daughter-in-laws that are with her. I want to take a minute here to do the Western thing, the Western mind. We've got a cast of people here. We're going to talk a while ago about names having meanings. Let's look at the names of the people that are involved here. Bethlehem, Judah, of course, we mentioned this morning, Bethlehem means house of bread, which has a little bit of significance later on. Moab, in our lesson today, is a country, and its inhabitants descend from Abraham's nephew Lot. And he fathered children by his oldest daughter. You remember the story after Sodom's destruction. Lot and his 2 daughters ended up in the hills, in the mountains, because he was afraid of the people in Zoar who was left, that they might be harmed or killed because of his involvement with Sodom. Elimelech was the man in the story who was the head of the family. His name means God of the King. Naomi means my joy or pleasant. We have a Naomi back here, only she goes by joy. We have one of those person with those names even today. Mahlon, his name meant sick or invalid, that was the oldest son. And Chilion means pining. And pining, to me, that's an old word, and I had to look it up. But it means to waste away through grief or hunger or pain. You see people a lot of times in nursing homes. That's where I thought of first. Pining away. They're wasting away. Sometimes you see it in emotions through grief, and they just can't work through or get over the thing that's grieving them. One of the wives, the first one was Orpah, and her name means stiff-necked. Does that sound like a clue to you? We don't have anything else about her that would indicate that she was hard-headed or stiff-necked about it, but that was her name. And Ruth means friend. And they went to Moab. Now, Elimelech's family did. Moab had been always enemies of Israel. And so I don't know why they chose to go that direction, other than there was famine in the country where they were. That was probably the closest place. If they had food there at all, it would have been closer to go there than to Egypt, or closer than even Mesopotamia. But I do know when your family is hungry and times are tough, sometimes we do unwise things. And I'm not saying that this was unwise, because it worked out where it was a good thing. Let's start at verse 6, then we'll read some more. We'll read through the end of the chapter, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of it. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Therefore she went out from the place where she was, and her two daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, Go, return each of you to your mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband. And then she kissed him, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, Surely we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband tonight and should also bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes, that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave you, nor turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. When she saw that she was determined to go, When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. Now the two of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And it happened when they had come to Bethlehem that all the city was excited because of them. And the women said, Is this Naomi? So she said to them, Do not call me Naomi, which means pleasant and joyful, but call me Mara, which means bitter. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord has brought me home again empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. Now they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Okay. So verse 6, Naomi decides to return to Bethlehem. They have food. And it's been over 10 years now since they left. And so the three of them start out. And then Naomi decides this is really not fair to the girls. They don't have much hope of a life as strangers or foreigners in Bethlehem. So she encourages them strongly to return home and remarry and find security, which was a big deal. Women here in this country nowadays usually can work and manage to get by. But there, the women had nothing if they didn't have a husband to provide income for them. They didn't have much that they could do. So she's telling them they need to stay where they're familiar with the situation. In verse 8, she tries to run them off. It sounds like she said, go home where the things are familiar and you know how to survive. The Lord deal kindly and graciously with you as you have with the dead and with me. She's not angry with them and she's not disgusted with them. She's trying to look out for their benefit and their good. May the Lord grant you security and rest in the home of a new husband. And she kissed them bye, giving them permission to leave her. And they tuned up and bought. Because women folks are wanting to do. I didn't have to say that, did I? I do my own share of bawling anymore, it seems like. In verse 10, he says, surely we will return with you. The girl said this. Return with you to your land. This is a good indication of what kind of person Naomi was. They're at least willing to give up their family and their familiar places and familiar life, and they'll go wherever she goes because they trust her and her judgment, and they really, I think, they trust her God. We will be impressed as we read the story with the characters of both Naomi and Ruth. They inspire each other. They're very gracious and thoughtful people. In verses 11 through 15, Naomi tries to discourage them, like we said, and she knows she has nothing much. It will be bare survival for her, not to mention the two girls, because she at least is of the right nationality, and she's going home. To people know her there, and they still care for her, and she has a place to go. But the two girls are Moabites. Israel's not supposed to have anything to do with Moabites. And so they're going, if they went back, they're going with two strikes against them already. So it's hard for Naomi to cut these apron strings because she really does love these two. And Orpah kisses Naomi bye, and she leaves with tears in her eyes. She does go back, but Ruth just clings to her, and she doesn't want to turn her loose. And Naomi tries once more to convince Ruth to go back like her sister-in-law. Verse 16 and 17, Ruth makes her response. Entreat me not to leave you, or turn back from following after you. Do you remember the song that's taken from this passage? Some of you are old enough to remember hearing it at least, if not singing it. Whither thou goest, I will go. Wherever thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, my love. Whither thou goest, I will go. For as in that story long ago, the same sweet love story now is so. Thy people shall be my people, my Lord. Whither thou goest, I will go. I sang that song at my mom and dad's wedding. And my mom, when I was little, would walk around the house singing that song, and I finally learned the words. That may not be exactly right, but that's close to the words. In verse 18, when Naomi saw that Ruth had made herself strong, the footnote says, she was determined to go with her. She stopped talking about it. And they went on to Bethlehem. The city was excited to see Naomi. Is it really you? I can't believe it's you. It's been 10 years. And they're all excited. Naomi says, don't call me Naomi, but call me Mara, bitter. The Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went out full. I had family. I had hopes. I had dreams. We had plans. I had a purpose in life. But now the Lord has brought me home empty. She felt empty. She still had Ruth, a devoted daughter-in-law, who in the next chapter we're going to see, it says, Ruth was better than 7 sons to her. And so she had something. She wasn't completely empty. But she's really down. But that is soon to change. Naomi will see, as some of us have seen, our Heavenly Father turns a bad situation into something beautiful and delightful. He is extraordinarily good at that. Naomi and Ruth are there in time for the barley harvest. And we will see next time how that plays into the story. The Lord is calling to his people in this story, the ones who love him. Are your ears beginning to hear his words? As Ruth's story unfolds, we will see our Father's tender mercies reach out and take her in. He wants to enjoy a relationship with you. If you have a need, come let us know and we'll pray for you to him.